This is a car commercial, but it's not about cars. It's about the people who buy them. A decade ago, Hyundai gave people confidence with America's best warranty. Today, we're providing another kind of confidence. Buy any new Hyundai, and if in the next year you lose your income, we'll let you return it. That's the Hyundai Assurance. We're all in this together, and we'll all get through it together.
Very powerful, isn't it? Well, let's have a look in detail what they're saying. This is a car commercial, but it's not about cars. Well, what is it about? Really, it's about a much broader offering than just the functional product. It's about understanding the customer, showing that we've got empathy for the customer. And it's about understanding the deep fears and emotions. By the way, this commercial ran at the time of the GFC, the global financial crisis. Now, Hyundai managed to gain share when car sales were going down. Not only did they gain share, but they actually increased car sales. So, what I'm going to do now is show you some images of well-known brands, or maybe not so well-known brands, and to understand what is this extra bit beyond the core product, the functional core that is on offer. Is this about transport? Oh wow, Ferrari. Well, much more than just transport. It's about luxury, it's about external signs of success. Interestingly, it's also about community, because there is a mass following for Ferrari, and we'll find even there's a hashtag. There it is, Essere Ferrari, which means to be Ferrari. So what is the essence of the Ferrari spirit? By the way, that Corse Clienti image you see there, well, that's a service for people who already own a Ferrari. They can buy an ex-racing car and they get tutored by Formula One drivers. So yes, luxury success community. There's a mass community. There's an elite community of those who own a Ferrari, and a bit more elite again, those who are in the Corse Clienti. And there's education, and with the Essere Ferrari hashtag, that gives you an impression of the social component of the brand, of the family. Is this just about clothing? Okay, the brand is Country Road. The images, I took them. You can see they're not professional photographers. This was at a store near where I live. And these words say, Australian traceable merino. So it's merino wool, it's Australian wool, it's traceable. You can follow the other image here that the words you probably can't read at all. So you can trace each item back to the farm where the sheep and the wool comes from. What is this about? It's about a sense of purpose, sustainability, maybe short supply chains. It's about being able to follow and find out what the practices are on the farms where the wool comes from. So if we have concerns about animal cruelty, in other sectors to do with clothing and footwear, there might be concerns about exploitation of child labour or poor working conditions. So here we come into the area of radical transparency. So when you purchase one of these items, it's more than just an item of clothing. Purpose, sustainability, short supply chain, animal cruelty, radical transparency. Well, what they're mentioning here is much more than just computing. No one ever got fired for buying IBM equipment. They're targeting who? Well, probably the chief technology officer or a person in charge of technology or information systems within large organizations, but also, the CEO or sole trader who really doesn't want to put the business at risk for a mistake in what might be considered a back office function, a support function. There's a risk to the business, there's a risk to one's own career. Clearly, if you put the whole business at risk, you're not going to last very long. There's also then different types of communities, going back to the concept of community. There's the tried and trusted traditional community, say who follow the IBM and established brands, versus those who are much more dynamic and experimental in the way they approach technology. Perhaps there's also a concern around social responsibility. So if I'm the chief technology officer, I make a big mistake with my information systems, the business is at risk, but also the people who are employed by the business. So they need to be very careful. There's one's own career, there's the shareholders, and there's the livelihood of one's fellow colleagues. Again, transport, is this just transport? Well, Harley Davidson is a well-established brand, well-known. Their traditional sound is an important part of their branding. That might disappear actually with a move to electric bikes. What's the broader image, the broader offering here? Well, there's a sense of freedom and open spaces. We can go back to the famous Easy Rider movie, and the hippies, outstanding actors mentioned here, like Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson. There's perhaps also a sense of community. These are all Harley drivers, Harley owners. In the United States in particular, they organise big tours across the countryside. They will last a week, 10 days. What's interesting here is then you can have a different interaction between the consumer and the product, between consumer and consumer, and between consumer and the company. Managers, executives can see how the riders interact amongst each other, how they interact with the bikes, and along the way, everyone learns. The riders learn about the bikes, about how others drive them, and the company learns about the interaction. Little interesting side issue here. On their website, now, they don't even use the words in the logo. So, again, the broader offering is freedom, history, community. It's a community of the Harley riders, but also the elite users, those who go on these rides. There's a time element. It is expensive in time to go on these rides. And again, education, because you're learning and you're being educated by the engineers from the company and by your colleagues in the community. Banking, is it basically banking? Now this slide comes from a presentation by Forrester that's online, but in particular I'm not too concerned about this apparent transition over time. But this brand, First Direct, it's an anti-banking bank. They're quite unashamed, unapologetic. In some of the communication, they say, you hate banking, so do we. So let's make sure we spend as little time as possible doing it. So they use technology. They're now part of the HSBC group. Saving time. There's a sense of community. It's modern, fun, iconoclastic people. And they don't want to cut across the intimidating nature of the traditional banks. Now, walking into a branch isn't as intimidating as it might have been in times gone by, but still they try to make sure to have a different interaction and a different sensation. It's an important part of the fintech, the revolution, quote unquote, that's happening now. Now, they're not going to take away all the customers from the traditional banks. However, there are enough of them to make these businesses viable and sustainable. Okay, in general, what's the basic theory here? We're distinguishing between a core product, the basic function, and there's the functional component, emotional, social, others. Educational, for example. Sustainability. So there's the product plus. And that is what I hope you can and want to introduce in your offering. And that way we can go from pure satisfaction by your existing customers, which is an emotion, and transform that into a behavior of better retention and word of mouth. So that will help acquisition of new customers. If you can infuse vibrancy into the retention and the acquisition, then you can give a self-fulfilling, self-reinforcing cycle. Satisfaction, retention, acquisition, and again. So what are some broad strategies for vibrant retention? Under these three headings, mobilize, detect, convert. I'm just highlighting a few little items that will come up. Yes, mobilize staff and management so that they are committed and inspired. Very important. If you've got committed, inspired, high-quality staff who are interested in interacting well with customers, then you can give them greater power and freedom to operate. So empowerment. Very importantly, forced retention is of little value. You have to then engage in compensating behaviours like more advertising, more discounts. It leads to low staff morale and negative word of mouth. So If you're in that mode, you try to detect the problems, certainly detect problems with customers before they leave. Typically, however, the risks don't come in price. As we've said, there's a core product, but much more. It's the much more that can be very important. It can add enormous amounts of value to the offer. And therefore, it's not only price, but often things like customer service and your flexibility to deal with customers that are a risk. And you've detected some problems with clients, maybe try to convert them through communication, have a good radar system to detect problems very early. Importantly, have an active response. Define the problem, solve it. Incorporate it into your offering. The fact that only 1 or 2 customers might be complaining doesn't mean it's a broader problem. It probably means that that's just the tip of the iceberg and a lot of others either can't be bothered or are there disaffected and are ripe for the picking for those who've got the different approach. So be active, reaching out, listening, and taking action. Perhaps, I said down the bottom here, create special project teams. That's to solve problems, but also to keep on top of potentials and to stay ahead of the curve. Now, so far in this recent videos, podcast, I've talked about Blue Ocean Strategy, Bricolage from the entrepreneurship area, and now Augmented Product. So Blue Ocean Strategy has been, was a 10-year journey. They've done more. Now we have the Blue Ocean Strategy approach. Very, very interesting. Bricolage is borrowed from the entrepreneurship startup environment. After all, the big challenge for large established firms is to be as nimble and flexible as startups and small firms. And what we've just talked about now is this concept of the augmented product. Add extra dimensions to your offer, add meaning to your offer, and in that way have more and deeper connections with your customers. Now, this approach of the augmented product can be used for you as the business, you as the leader, CEO or supervisor or manager of a team, but also you as an employee dealing with issues for the organization and for the hierarchy. These 3 approaches have what I'm saying, offering here as different freedoms. The Blue Ocean Strategy gives you a way to be free from a red ocean competition. The Bricolage was in a way to sort of be free of the financial lockdown that we're seeing as a result of COVID. And by looking at this augmented product, you can move towards being freed from the commoditized market. And yes, well, I flipped this video, this presentation. Instead of giving the title at the beginning, it's here. If you go beyond the product, it's another freedom to open up growth potentials in your company or organization.